I was originally going to title this something along the lines of why Alistair Dust is my favorite has-been hotel pairing, because it dispels a lot of the issues I find with people's perception of the ace umbrella. Before I get into all the stuff, for the uninitiated, being ace or asexual means having little to no sexual attractions to others. This idea covers like gray sexual, demisexual, cupiosexual, and other subdivisions, which you don't need to know what all those words mean for the time being. For now, I find the ace level to be a really useful word. The only downside is a lot of people don't understand what that means, so I wanted to make this video to talk about it, why I find it important in the next step forward. Before I get into my own experience, I want to cover some points that people use against aces in case you find yourself in public discourse about these topics. A lot of naysayers believe aces belong under the queer umbrella because it's not asexuality but a lack thereof. I feel like this is just right-wing propaganda to try to split apart the LGBT people's fight for equality as part of a divide and conquer strategy, but a lot of people buy into this notion, so I feel it's worth mentioning, and it has a lot to do with the thumbnail of this video. And where ace people are allowed to have their space are usually in fictional shows where there's other queer people are allowed to exist. So if somebody's canceling gay representation, they're probably also canceling ace representation at the same time. There is an exorbitant amount of sexualization in society. A huge part of femme culture is tailoring your appearance to the male gaze so that we are sexually appealing. Men openly judge women exclusively off their bangability, and online discourse is full of red pillars getting mad at women for choosing to be single, and also telling them to dress modestly while simultaneously rating them off of how hot they are. Sorry for this weird interruption. I know you're watching a very enjoyable video about asexuality, but unfortunately YouTube has amped up their copyright restrictions and nothing I'm doing is working, so I will be doing the Leafy thing and putting gameplay footage over it. But don't worry, I will still be using clips when it's necessary. If you just want to sit back and listen to it while you play a video game or something, which you might already be doing right now, but I do encourage you to do that. Just sit back, listen, soak it in. Thank you for watching, and back to the video. Part of the woman experience is to be perpetually sexualized, and while not all aces are repulsed by this, a lot of us still find unnerving. Coming back to this video's thumbnail, children's media is one of the only places where ace people can sit back and enjoy a show without society's hypersexualization shoved in our face. I'm personally not quite as worried about ace representation in adult media as much as others, because it is much more of like a sexuality versus this gender expression. So I'm not worried about that as much as in adult media, because in the past decade there's been a number of kids shows that display surprising emotional maturity and fantastic storytelling. She-Ra and the Princess of Power is my favorite. I also love Kipo, Steven's Universe, Amphibia, and Infinity Train. They're shows with surprising character depth, so while they have less violence and more limited language, they're equally if not more deep than most adult media. Because of their target demographic of these shows, namely kids, it is required that these shows have no sexual content, which caters to the preference of asexuals like myself. If I am led to believe this is wrong, please correct me, but I'm speaking broadly, so this isn't necessarily true for everyone, but I really like that about these shows. There are some adult shows that actively give minimal sexual content, or at least they present it in a fashion that's so irreverent that I find it conceptually difficult to grasp. Like, for example, in BoJack Horseman plus Rick and Morty, I've learned that a lot of people don't like these shows because the sexual content is so gross at times that it repels them, but that's one of the reasons why I like them. The writers go so overboard that it makes sex look extremely disgusting, and as somebody who already thinks sex is gross, I can appreciate the fact that the writers are not treating it like a sacred cow like the rest of society. This is also part of the reason why animes like Redo of Healer don't bother me. I appreciate it when shows utilize sex for storytelling and not as a romantic climax. A lot of people don't understand the lack of sexual desires, or just the concept of sex being not enjoyable. So when folks hear about adults watching children's shows or things like Redo of Healer or other things, normies tend to think it's degenerate in nature rather than understand, like, nobody gets the inherent detachment. What the fuck? This is where ace masking comes in, the act of pretending to like sex and all the stuff that comes with developing a sexual identity. That way, when people ask, we just have lines of dialogue prepared to give somebody an answer answer that they're probably looking for, or to prevent further questioning. Like, for a lot of people, it could be pretending to already be in a relationship, or claiming you don't have the time, or you're too focused on growing yourself as a person before looking for a relationship. Life should theoretically be easier by going with the flow and pretending to enjoy sex, because outing yourself will make people like weirdly judgmental and create issues with friends and relationships simply because people don't understand it. A lot of people believe sex is an inherent craving that all people have, especially men, because testosterone allegedly increases libido. This belief about sexuality has fueled TERFs and right-wingers who believe people who are assigned male at birth have an underlying desire to commit rape, and that's coded into their DNA, and they're just waiting for the right opportunity. Though I'm worried that the same people who believe these things don't think asexuality is real either, which is why asexuality acceptance helps promote trans femme acceptance as well as dispel some myths about misandry, which helps all men, in addition to countering bad narratives that women dress erotically because they desire sex to attract a mate and not because they enjoy the aesthetic or feel more comfortable that way. I feel representation in shows or people discussing matters about asexuality is extremely beneficial, and since the rest of the LGBT community is fighting for representation, equal rights, and societal understanding and acceptance, ace people should be included in queer discussions, as we all benefit from each other. While a lot of current kids shows are trying to add good representation, they are at a disadvantage because there's already an inherent lack of sexual content. So while I enjoy that there's no fan service as opposed to many anime and adult media, the show caters all the characters to asexuals without having to try at all, which results in representation everywhere, but completely devoid of depth. This is the issue with Peridot in Steven's universe. Nothing about it was special, and if anything, the comparison of fusion to sex made for a plethora of issues. I still want more shows like Steven's universe, but adult entertainment desperately needs their own ace characters. Not just that, but ace couples. This would fix another massive issue with normie perception of asexuality, and this is where I'll get into the Alistair Dust ship in a bit. When a lot of people think of ace, they think of sex, repulsed aromantics, but that's given people already understand the concept in the first place. Thanks to Jaden Animations, millions of people who might otherwise have no idea what either of those words mean now have some sort of understanding. However, not all asexuals are aromantic nor sex repulsed. This creates a lot of issues with people learning about their sexuality. I have experience with this because I was trying to reconcile my low libido, like how this is going to negatively impact my relationships, and because I just don't want to give it up as much as other people, it's not good. And then also because people would be weird about it, I tried covering it up by being like hypersexual, which got me into a couple really bad situations. Makes me wish that I had learned about asexuality in sex ed as a kid, so I wouldn't have to have had those experiences. Asexuality isn't devoid of attraction or drive. Despite that being the case for some people have to go through those bad experiences first, or do research, or talk to a therapist. And if we had characters in media to portray or like convey what asexuality is like, that representation would help a lot of people find themselves without having the aforementioned issues. That's a huge reason why people like to ship two characters or have favorite couples in television. It's a safe environment for people to explore concepts and ideas. This is why I like the Alistair Dust Has Been Hotel ship. We have Angel Dust, who, sex isn't like really intimate towards him in the slightest. They're a porn star. Then we have Alistair, who doesn't he doesn't like any of that stuff. If all of Angel Dust's urges are being exhausted at work, that means the two can just enjoy each other's company to the fullest without sexuality causing issues. Though that's an oversimplification, but it is a concept that I really like. Asexuality negatively impacts men and women differently because as a woman, men just expect sex in a relationship. In fact, on dating profiles, I would immediately swipe left on anybody who had sex positive tag just because sex shouldn't be enough. Oh my god, sex shouldn't be important enough in any relationship to make that the forefront of a dating profile. Besides, when a couple has been together for a while, their level of sexual activity goes down. Plus, there's solo methods of dealing with that stuff. The inverse is also true. People shouldn't be forced to announce to the world that they're ace just because there's so many people who view others as vending machines where you input kindness and out comes sex. This also goes for trans people. It doesn't matter if an individual says, it's okay, I accept them, I understand, be yourself. There's too many assholes who love to openly harass people for being different, and people rarely stand up for the marginalized. Asexual people are more likely to face sexual harassment and violence. This is why asexual representation is important. We need characters to demystify the concept of asexuality to society through various media. I just think representation in like shows and stuff is a really good media of doing that. And while kids shows is good for existing asexuals to have a safe environment to consume media that doesn't like fucking gross them out.
That really is nothing. She's very sexually aggressive. Oh.
That's not an excuse for adult media to be just fucking disgusting and to perpetuate the hypersexualization of society. Back to sexuality masking and societal behaviors. Men should theoretically have an easier time being ace because society expects them to be the pursuer, so it's optional for them. However, if a guy doesn't pursue, he's labeled an incel and mocked for his lack of sexual experience. A man is applauded for having lots of sex with a lot of different people. There's a social hierarchy to sex, which ace men are shoved to the bottom of. Meanwhile, a woman who has never had sex is seen as the most pure and majestic thing, especially since men really love the concept of taking away someone's virginity. Ace women who've never been with a man are seen as some sort of holy grail of fuckery. Meanwhile, the higher a woman's body count, the less likely a man would want to have sex with her. So if you're ace and avoid sex, people are more likely to try getting into your pants and fetishize you, but if you have lots of sex, there will be less men chasing. The lack of societal understanding in addition to the social pressures makes dating more difficult for asexuals. For now, I find the ace label to be a really useful word to describe how I feel. The only downside is a lot of people don't understand what that means, so I want to make this video to talk a little bit about it, why I find it important, and a next step forward with awareness. Key takeaways are, not all asexuals are sex repulsed, not all aces don't have sex. Some people don the label of ace to help them in a particular period of their life, and they'll later disown the label. Asexual representation is necessary in more shows to demystify the concept, and not all asexuals are aromantic. Asexuals are more likely to experience sexual violence and coercion. If you have an asexual partner, or would like to prepare yourself in the instance where you have one, the pinnacle of intimacy for us is probably different for us than it is for you, and is different from person to person because, for example, you know, I really don't care about sex. I think prostitution should be legal, but a massage is something I can literally go spend $50 and get. But for me, that's an incredibly intimate experience, so I don't feel comfortable walking into a parlor and paying a random stranger to do that. But that's always like my go-to when hanging out with somebody that I'm interested in. If you don't know what your partner would like, you can just ask them. It might not even be physical. Their favorite thing might just be playing video games together. There's also another topic that I want to discuss before I end the video. It is one thing that made me think I was not ace for a long time. So I thought erections and desire went hand in hand, but no, apparently the body just pumps a lot of blood through the erectile tissue and the vagina and the meat hose a couple times a day just to keep it regulated. I didn't understand that worked. So, you know, the existing things that we have about sex ed just fucking failed an entire generation. So I used to believe that since this was a thing my body did, that clearly means I'm not ace. But no, that's just like the human body being its gross usual self. That stuff also tends to happen while relaxed too. So like I mentioned the massage thing earlier, a certain level of alleged arousal during a massage is normal as the body is just doing its thing. So the body demonstrating symptoms of arousal doesn't invalidate being ace. There are some ace people who may find this experience very uncomfortable, and I empathize with that. For some reason, people believe that the sexual organ working as it's intended means that you definitely totally enjoy what's going on or whatnot, and that's just a lie used to invalidate rape victims, dismiss rape accusations, and this is also why verbal consent is really important, that the body is not the end-all be-all. I know I shipped this video as sort of an ace representation is everywhere, which is untrue, but it very very easily could be. My realization process is way different from what I've seen online because, you know, I used to watch a lot of manosphere stuff, which, you know, are pretty acephobic. But, you know, they're also transphobic, and look how far we've come. For more on that, from the time I was little, I knew I was different from everybody else and not really accepted, so I was sucked into the hypermasculine spaces in search of approval, some social validation, and I felt like I had to not only seek out sex to increase my social status amongst men, but enjoy it, and then I need to go tell other men about it so I could be seen as cool amongst all the other misogynistic piggies, and that will provide me with feelings of self-worth. Part of breaking away from that cycle was, I think I got like a comment where somebody identified as like an ace trans person, and I remember thinking, wait, that's an option? And then I learned about asexuality and was like, oh, I don't really know if this is exactly what I am, but this is the closest thing to everything that I like know so far. I'm taking this label, it's mine now, nobody can take it from me. And then I continued to do research, and I learned about like the micro label called Asexual, and you know, maybe if this video gets a lot of views, I'll talk about that. Thank you for watching today's video. If you want to learn more about ace stuff, check out the videos I have linked in the description below. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.